You have no rights here anymore. Get out of my house. Don't make me call security." I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, still wearing the black funeral suit I hadn't even taken off yet. The coffin carrying my son had been lowered into the ground less than 3 hours ago. The smell of flowers and damp soil was still stuck in my nose. And the woman saying those words to me was my daughter-in-law, Laura Bennett. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I just looked at her for a moment, bent down slowly, picked up my car keys from the marble floor, and did something she would never have expected. But before I tell you what that was, let me ask you something real quick. Where are you listening to this from right now? What city? What state? Leave a comment and let me know how far the story of an old man like me has traveled. And if you've ever been looked down on, pushed aside, or made to feel like you no longer belonged in your own family, hit that like button. Not for me, for yourself. Because stories like this have a way of finding the people who need them most. Hello, buddies. My name is Henry Calloway. I'm 72 years old. I spent most of my life as a structural engineer. Bridges, buildings, foundations. I believed in one simple thing: if something collapses, it's never sudden. The cracks were always there. People just ignored them. That afternoon, standing in that massive living room with its glass walls facing the lake, I felt something collapse inside me. My son Evan was gone. Cancer took him. The kind doctors call aggressive, like using a polite word makes it hurt less. It ate away at him slowly, day by day, until the strongest man I knew could barely lift his hand. Evan didn't want to die in a hospital. He wanted to see the water in the mornings. He wanted birds instead of machines. So I sold my little house in Ohio, the one my wife and I had lived in for over 40 years. I didn't think twice. I transferred every dollar I had and moved in with Evan. I slept on a folding cot. I woke up every time he coughed or whispered my name. For 6 months, that house wasn't a mansion. It was a waiting room for grief. And now it was no longer mine to stand in. Laura stood a few feet away from me, arms crossed, perfect posture, perfect hair, not a tear out of place. She looked like someone finishing a business meeting, not a woman who had just buried her husband. "You're just a guest here," she said flatly. "The will's been read. Everything belongs to me now." The way she said everything told me exactly what she thought of me. I looked around that room one last time. The spot where Evan's hospital bed had been. The window he liked open in the mornings. The silence felt louder than any argument ever could. Laura stepped closer and pressed her hand lightly against my chest. Not hard. Just enough to remind me who she thought had the power. That's when I reached down and picked up my keys. My old sedan was still out in the driveway. 13 years old, scratches on the side, but it was mine. As I walked toward the door, a memory flashed through my mind. Evan's voice, weak but clear from one of his last good days. "Dad, promise me something," he'd said. "No matter what Laura does after I'm gone, don't react. Don't fight. Don't try to fix it right away." At the time, I thought it was fear talking. Now I knew better. I stepped outside. The door closed behind me with a dry click that sounded final. Cold wind from the lake cut through my suit. I stood there with nothing but my keys and an old handkerchief in my pocket. Laura probably thought she'd won. What she didn't know was that my son never built anything without a plan. And the day she threw me out, she walked straight into the first step of his blueprint. When Evan first called me, his voice was already different. Thinner, slower, like every word had to climb a hill before it reached my ear. "Dad, I need you." That was all he said. No explanations, no drama, just 4 words that carried more weight than anything I'd heard in my 72 years. I didn't ask questions. I didn't ask how long. I didn't ask what the doctors said. I packed a bag that same night and stared at the walls of my little Ohio house one last time. The pictures, the quiet, the life my wife and I had built together. I sold it a week later. 40 years of memories turned into numbers on paper. Every dollar I'd saved, every bit of security I thought I'd earned, I moved it without hesitation. Because when your child calls you like that, money stops meaning what it used to. Evan didn't want hospitals. He hated the smell, the beeping machines, the way doctors spoke in careful sentences like they were afraid words might shatter him. He wanted to wake up looking at the lake, hearing birds instead of monitors. So we turned his living room into a hospital room. The bed went near the glass doors, curtains half open to soften the sun, oxygen machine humming like a tired heartbeat, a small table beside him with water, pills, tissues, and a notebook he never let out of reach. For 6 months I lived on a folding cot in the study. Every cough woke me. Every half-dream whisper of Dad pulled me up on aching knees. I learned the sound of his breathing so well I could tell when sleep came easy and when pain was winning. Some nights we didn't talk at all. We just listened to the wind across the lake. Laura was there too, technically. She came and went dressed like she was heading to meetings, not a dying man's bedside. Her perfume always arrived before she did, strong, expensive, out of place. She'd ask questions that felt wrong in that room. How are the company shares looking? Did the lawyer confirm the valuation? Next week's call is still on, right? Evan would listen quietly, his jaw tight. When she left, he always exhaled like someone dropping a heavy bag. I noticed it. I just told myself it wasn't my place. That's the lie old men tell themselves when they're trying to keep peace. One afternoon, when the pain meds hadn't dulled his mind yet, Evan asked me to sit closer. He reached for my hand, his grip weaker but intentional. "Dad, promise me something." I smiled, trying to keep my voice steady. "Anything, son," he swallowed, gathering strength like he was lifting something heavy inside himself. "When I'm gone, don't react." I frowned. "React to what?" "Laura," he said, no hesitation. "No matter what she does, don't argue. Don't sue, don't try to fix anything right away." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it sounded like fear, the kind that comes when people sense the end. "You don't need to worry about that," I told him. "I'll be fine." Evan shook his head slowly. His eyes sharpened in a way that made my chest tighten. That old look, the one he had as a boy taking apart radios, understanding how things worked before anyone else did. "Silence isn't weakness, Dad," he said. "It's space. Space makes people reveal themselves." He glanced toward the notebook on the table, didn't open it, just touched it lightly. "Promise me." The machines hummed. The lake shimmered outside. And I felt something settle into place, even though I didn't understand it yet. "I promise," I said. Evan closed his eyes then. His face softened. Like that promise was enough to let him rest. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the moment he handed me the hardest job of my life. Not to fight, not to protect, but to wait. The day after the funeral, the house felt hollow. Not quiet, hollow. Like sound itself didn't know where to land anymore. People had come and gone. Neighbors, business associates, faces I barely recognized, all saying the same practiced sentences. "He's in a better place. At least he's not suffering." I nodded until my neck ached, but none of it reached me. My eyes kept drifting back to the photo of Evan by the casket. The same smile he had as a boy. The one that made you think everything would work out. When the last car pulled away, I thought I'd finally have a moment. Just a few hours. Time to sit. To breathe. To feel my son still close to me inside those walls. That's when Laura walked in. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. Each step echoed, deliberate, controlled. She didn't ask how I was holding up. Didn't mention Evan's name. She stopped a few feet away, crossed her arms, and looked at me the way someone looks at a problem they're ready to remove. "You have no rights here anymore," she said. The words didn't rush. They landed one by one. She told me the will had already been confirmed. The lawyer had explained everything. The company, the house, the accounts, all of it was hers now. The way she said it felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced in the mirror. "You're just a guest," she added, "and I want you gone. Now." I stood there holding my breath, not because I didn't understand, but because part of me still couldn't believe a human being could say that hours after burying her husband. I looked around the living room, the space where Evan's hospital bed had been, the window he liked open in the mornings, the chair where I'd sat reading to him when the pain got bad. Laura stepped closer. She placed her hand on my chest and pushed lightly. Not enough to hurt, just enough to humiliate. That was the moment something inside me went very still. I bent down, picked up my car keys, and walked toward the door without saying a word. My wallet, my phone, my documents, everything else that proved who I was stayed behind in that house. The door closed behind me with a dry click. I stood on the porch, wind cutting through my suit, staring at the lake Evan loved. My old sedan sat at the end of the driveway, small and out of place among the luxury cars. As I drove away, I didn't feel anger yet. I felt erased. That night, I didn't go far. I ended up at a gas station near the highway, staring at a pay phone like it belonged to another century. I counted the coins in my pocket, enough for one call. I dialed Marion Brooks. She answered on the fourth ring, half asleep, then fully awake the moment she heard my voice. "Henry, where are you? I've been calling all afternoon." "I'm fine," I said, even though that word felt thin. "Laura asked me to leave." Silence. Then one sentence, firm as steel. "Don't move, I'm coming." Marion didn't ask questions. She never did when things mattered most. She picked me up 15 minutes later, took one look at my funeral suit and clenched her jaw. She drove without speaking, like she knew words would only get in the way. That night, I slept in her guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick. The next morning, while I drank coffee that tasted like cardboard, Marion showed me something on her phone. Laura's social media. Photos, champagne, smiles, a caption about new beginnings. The living room, Evan's room, now staged for parties. I watched in silence as post after post appeared. Cars, clothes, celebrations. The house turned into a showroom. Marion waited for me to explode. I didn't. Because somewhere between that porch and that kitchen table, I remembered Evan's voice. "Don't react." And that's when I understood something important. Laura wasn't grieving, she was revealing herself. And I was exactly where my son needed me to be. The waiting changed me, not in a loud way, in a quiet, sharpening way. Days passed at Marion's house with an odd rhythm. Mornings were calm, coffee, a short walk around the block. Afternoons filled with silence that felt heavier than noise. At night, Marion would sit across from me at the kitchen table, phone in her hand, giving updates I never asked for but always listened to. Laura bought a new car, she said one evening, bright red, loud enough to announce itself before you see it. Another night she told me about a party at the house, music by the lake, string lights. Strangers laughing where my son once struggled to breathe. I said nothing. Marion hated that. "How are you this calm?" she snapped once. "She threw you out like trash. She's parading around like she won." I folded the newspaper carefully, smoothing the crease. "She thinks she won," I said. "That difference mattered. You see, I spent my life working with structures. Bridges don't fail when people are shouting. They fail quietly, from weight, from stress, from someone not understanding what's actually holding everything up." Laura was spending like someone who believed money was endless. But money isn't endless. Access is what matters. One night, close to midnight, the phone rang. Marion looked at the screen and froze. "It's her." I took the phone without rushing. Laura didn't bother with greetings. "Where are you?" she demanded. "That's not important," I said. "I need the key," she snapped. The small one, Evan's safe. The one behind the bookshelf. I stayed silent. I know you have it, she continued, breath fast now. I tore the house apart. You're the only one he trusted. That's when I heard it. Not anger, panic. I don't have it, I said calmly. She laughed, sharp and hollow. Don't lie to me. I need what's inside that safe. I need it now. Need, not want. Need tells you everything. How much do you want? She blurted. Money, name it. Don't pretend to be noble. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling fan slowly turning above me. I don't have the key, I repeated. Her voice cracked. I'll call the police. I'll tell them you stole estate property. You'll regret this. I waited a beat longer than necessary. Do what you think you need to do, I said, silence on the line, then breathing, fast, uneven. You're trying to destroy me, she whispered. I ended the call. Marion stared at me like I'd just stepped away from an explosion without flinching. She's scared, she said. I nodded. And scared people make mistakes. That night, I went to the guest room and opened my old suitcase. The one I'd brought when Evan first called me. I reached into the lining and felt paper. A business card, plain, ivory, no fancy lettering. Elaine Porter, attorney at law. Evan had given it to me months earlier, one afternoon when Laura wasn't home. If things ever feel wrong, he'd said, call this number. No one else. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, card in my hand. Laura's call wasn't random. It was the sound of pressure finally hitting the wrong spot. I dialed. The phone rang twice. Then a calm voice answered, fully awake like she'd been expecting me. Law Office of Elaine Porter. My name is Henry Calloway, I said. I'm calling about my son. There was a pause, papers shifting. Mr. Calloway, she said evenly, we've been waiting for you. I closed my eyes. Evan's blueprint had just opened. And if you've ever wondered what it feels like when someone who underestimated you finally realizes they shouldn't have, stay with me. Because from this point on, Laura wasn't running the game anymore. She was running straight toward a wall she didn't know existed. Elaine Porter's office didn't look like the kind of place where drama happened. No glass towers, no flashy signs, just an old brick building tucked away from the noise, like it didn't care who walked through its doors. That alone told me something. Elaine didn't waste time. She shook my hand, firm and steady, then sat across from me with a thin folder placed carefully on the table, like someone laying out blueprints instead of paper. First, she said, I need you to know this. Everything that's happening right now is exactly what your son anticipated. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just listened. She explained it slowly, clearly, the way you explain something important to someone who understands structure. The will Laura saw, the one that gave her everything. That was only the surface. The real foundation wasn't public. It wasn't dramatic. It was precise. Evan had built a trust, not to punish anyone, not out of spite, but to control access. He didn't want his life's work turned into fast cash, Elaine said. And he didn't want emotion deciding anything. The company shares Laura bragged about, they weren't money. They were ownership on paper. Valuable, yes, but locked, restricted, slow to move. And the house? Elaine paused before that part. The house is where people like Laura usually make their first mistake, she said quietly. I already knew what she meant. Big houses don't just look expensive. They eat money, taxes, maintenance, utilities, staff, insurance. And someone who spends loudly usually needs cash quietly. She'll try to sell it, Elaine continued. Fast, probably below value, cash buyer. I nodded once. That night Marion confirmed it. Laura had hired a high-end realtor. Photos went up, videos, smiling tour by the lake, promises of luxury and freedom. She looked unstoppable, but Elaine's voice stayed in my head. She doesn't own the house the way she thinks. A few days later, the phone rang again. This time, Laura didn't bother pretending. I need you, she said, breathless. Something's wrong. The bank won't release the funds. The sale is delayed. I said nothing. They're saying there's a problem with the title, she snapped. That's impossible. I inherited it. I still said nothing. Henry, she said, her voice cracking now, this isn't funny, fix this. That was the moment I understood. She wasn't angry anymore. She was afraid. Because for the first time since Evan died, the doors she thought were wide open weren't opening at all. And somewhere inside that house, buried under marble and glass and ego, was the truth Evan had left behind. Not as revenge, as proof. The blueprint wasn't about taking something back. It was about letting pressure do what pressure always does, reveal the weak point. And Laura was about to find it. The sale was supposed to be quick. Cash buyer, no inspections, no delays. That's what Laura told everyone. That's what she told herself. But on the morning the papers were meant to be signed, Marion's phone started buzzing nonstop. She didn't even have to unlock it to know something had gone wrong. Her face tightened the way it does when bad news arrives dressed as confusion. She's at the title office, Marion said quietly, and everything just stopped. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched. I didn't ask questions. I already knew what kind of silence that was. The kind that comes when someone runs into something solid at full speed. Minutes later, the next message came. They found a lien. Marion looked up at me, eyes wide. A big one. I closed my eyes slowly. Not relief, not joy, recognition. The house wasn't clean. It never had been. The buyer's attorney had paused the process instantly. No signatures, no transfer, no money, just a quiet line on a screen that changed everything. Creditor Henry Calloway. Marion covered her mouth. Henry, it's you. I nodded once. Laura didn't scream right away. According to Marion's friend at the office, she froze, stared at the document like it was written in another language. Then the noise came. Accusations, shouting, blame thrown at everyone in reach. But shouting doesn't erase ink. That afternoon my phone rang. Laura. This time her voice was unrecognizable. Henry, she said, breath breaking. They say your name is on the house. This has to be a mistake. Evan didn't have debts. You wouldn't do this. I let the silence stretch. My cards are declining, she whispered. The bank won't help me. I can't sell. I don't understand. For the first time since the funeral, she wasn't talking down to me. She was talking up. Please, she said, just tell me what to do. I thought of Evan in that hospital bed. The way he'd looked at me when he said, don't react. The way his fingers had brushed that notebook like it was the heart of everything. Come to Elaine Porter's office, I said calmly. Tomorrow, 10 in the morning, bring a lawyer. She tried to speak again. I ended the call. The next morning, Laura walked into Elaine's conference room looking smaller than I remembered. No confidence, no polish, just panic barely held together. Her lawyer looked worse. Elaine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She laid out the facts like measurements. The loan, the collateral, the maturity date, expired, defaulted. Legal. Laura's hands began to shake. You're taking the house, she whispered. Elaine answered for me. Mr. Calloway has the right to reclaim the property. Laura broke then, not dramatically, not loudly, just collapsed inward. Elaine gave her two options: fight and lose everything slowly, or leave quietly with something small and final. Her lawyer didn't even hesitate. Take the second option, he said. Laura signed. The pen slipped from her fingers when she was done. When she stood to leave, she didn't look at me. She couldn't. And as the door closed behind her, I felt something heavy lift, not because I'd won, but because Evan's structure had held. The wall hadn't moved, she had. And in that moment, I knew the waiting was almost over. Laura was gone within 48 hours. One suitcase, no speeches, no cameras, no champagne. The house emptied the same way arrogance always does, quietly, once the illusion collapses. I didn't go back there. I didn't need to. Elaine handled everything by the book. The debt was settled. The ownership transferred exactly the way Evan had designed it. Not to me, not to any person who would fight over it, to a foundation. My son's name now lives on paper for something that actually matters. The house was sold properly this time. No rush, no desperation, and the money didn't go toward luxury or appearances. It went to families who wake up every morning staring at hospital ceilings, wondering how they're going to survive another month. Travel costs, medication gaps, caregivers, the things insurance never covers. When Elaine told me everything was complete, I sat in Marion's kitchen and watched sunlight move across the floor. For the first time in months, my hands stopped shaking. Evan didn't just protect me, he protected his legacy. I moved into a small place near the water, nothing fancy, just quiet. Mornings with coffee, afternoons with books, evenings where the wind sounds like breathing. I still miss my son every day. That never goes away. But grief doesn't own me anymore. It sits beside me now like an old weight I know how to carry. I learned something late in life. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is space. Space lets truth stand up straight. If you stayed with me this long, thank you. And if this story meant something to you, if you've ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or treated like you didn't matter, subscribe. These stories are for people who know that dignity doesn't shout. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, sometimes the strongest move you can make is to stand still and let the structure speak for itself.